I never thought the day would come when I'd have to choose between my family and my own self-respect. But life has a way of forcing you into corners you never imagined existed. My name is Marcus, I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who hurt you the most, and how silence can be the most powerful response of all. Growing up in suburban Chicago, my brother Derek and I were inseparable. We shared a bedroom in our parents' modest 3-bedroom ranch house on Maple Street, where the vinyl siding was always slightly faded from the harsh Midwestern winters and the air conditioning unit hummed loudly every summer, struggling against the oppressive humidity that rolled in from Lake Michigan. Our neighborhood was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where block parties happened every 4th of July with red, white, and blue streamers hanging from every porch, and where the smell of barbecue would drift through the streets on warm Saturday afternoons. Derek was 3 years older than me, and in my eyes, he could do no wrong. He was the star quarterback at Lincoln High School, the kid who always seemed to have everything figured out, the one who made our parents beam with pride at every football game, every award ceremony, every parent-teacher conference. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one, the one who spent Friday nights in the basement with my nose buried in business books and coding tutorials while Derek was out celebrating another victory with his teammates. Our father, a factory supervisor at the local manufacturing plant, would often ruffle Derek's hair and talk about his athletic scholarships, his bright future, his natural charisma. When he looked at me, I could see the confusion in his eyes, as if he couldn't quite understand why I preferred spreadsheets to sports, why I'd rather analyze market trends than throw a football. Our mother, a nurse at the community hospital who worked double shifts to help make ends meet, tried to bridge the gap between us, but even she couldn't hide her excitement when Derek's name appeared in the local newspaper's sports section, which happened at least once a month during football season. The divergence in our paths became crystal clear after high school. Derek got a full ride to a state university on a football scholarship, and the whole neighborhood threw him a going-away party. I remember standing in our backyard that August evening, watching the sun set behind the old oak tree that had been there since before we were born, its branches casting long shadows across the yellowing grass, while everyone congratulated Derek and talked about his promising future. I had been accepted to a small liberal arts college with a decent business program, but I'd have to take out loans, work part-time jobs, sacrifice sleep and social life to make it work. Nobody threw me a party. Nobody seemed to notice when I left for school 3 weeks later, driving my beat-up Honda Civic down Interstate 90 with everything I owned packed into 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. College was brutal in ways I hadn't anticipated. While Derek was living the dream on campus, attending parties, making connections, enjoying the perks of being a college athlete with meal plans and housing all covered, I was working the night shift at a 24-hour diner near my campus, serving coffee and eggs to drunk students and tired truck drivers, my feet aching and my eyes burning from exhaustion. I'd finish my shift at 6 in the morning, go back to my cramped dorm room that smelled perpetually of mildew and instant ramen, shower quickly in the communal bathroom with its flickering fluorescent lights and perpetually clogged drains, and then head to my 8 o'clock classes. I survived on 3 to 4 hours of sleep most nights, fueled by cheap coffee and the stubborn determination that I would make something of myself, that I would prove that success wasn't just about natural talent or charisma or being good at throwing a ball. But Derek's golden path didn't last. Junior year, he tore his ACL during a game against their biggest rival. I remember getting the call from my mother, her voice shaking as she described the way his knee had twisted, the sound he'd made, the way the entire stadium had gone silent. I drove home that weekend, 5 hours through a November snowstorm, the windshield wipers barely keeping up with the heavy, wet flakes that turned the highway into a treacherous white tunnel. When I walked into the hospital room, Derek looked smaller somehow, diminished, his leg elevated and wrapped in bandages, his face pale against the sterile white pillows. He tried to smile when he saw me, but I could see the fear in his eyes, the fear that everything he'd built his identity on was crumbling. He never fully recovered. Oh, physically he healed, but the spark was gone. He lost his scholarship, dropped out of college, and moved back home. By the time I graduated with my business degree, Derek was working at the same factory where our father had spent 30 years of his life, coming home every evening with grease under his fingernails and exhaustion etched into his face. I felt sorry for him, I really did, But I also felt a strange sense of relief that I had chosen a different path, that I hadn't put all my eggs in one basket, that I had built my future on skills and knowledge rather than physical ability alone. After graduation, I moved to downtown Chicago with nothing but my degree, $700 in my bank account, and a burning desire to succeed. I found a tiny studio apartment in a building that had seen better days, probably back in the 1970s when the neighborhood was thriving and the streets were safe. The apartment was on the 4th floor of a 6-story building with no elevator, just a narrow stairwell that smelled like a combination of old cooking oil, cigarette smoke, and something vaguely chemical that I never could identify. My studio was barely 300 square feet, with a kitchenette that consisted of a hot plate, a mini fridge that hummed so loudly I had to unplug it at night to sleep, and a sink that dripped constantly no matter how many times I tried to fix it. The bathroom was so small I could sit on the toilet and wash my hands in the sink at the same time. The single window looked out onto a brick wall, and the radiator clanked and hissed all winter, either blasting heat until I was sweating or providing nothing at all, leaving me shivering under 3 blankets. But it was mine. It was in the city, close to opportunities, close to the financial district where glass and steel towers reached toward the sky like modern cathedrals of commerce. I could walk to job interviews, to networking events, to the library where I spent hours researching companies and industries. I took a job as a junior analyst at a mid-sized investment firm, making barely enough to cover rent, student loan payments, and ramen noodles, but I showed up early every single day, stayed late every single night, and absorbed everything I could learn. I studied the senior analysts, watched how they presented to clients, learned how they identified opportunities, understood how they built relationships. I made myself indispensable. Meanwhile, Derek's life seemed to be moving in the opposite direction. He got married to his high school sweetheart, Brittany, in a modest ceremony at the local VFW hall, with a DJ who played the same tired wedding playlist everyone had heard 1,000 times and a cash bar that ran out of beer before the reception was half over. They bought a small house in the same neighborhood where we grew up, a cookie-cutter ranch with beige siding and a postage stamp lawn that Derek mowed every Saturday morning. They had 2 kids in quick succession, and suddenly Derek was trapped in a life of mortgage payments, daycare costs, and the soul-crushing routine of factory work. I could see it wearing on him every time I came home for holidays, the way his shoulders slumped, the way his laugh didn't quite reach his eyes anymore, the way he'd crack open his 4th beer before dinner was even served. And that's when the comments started. At first, they were subtle, almost playful. "Still living in that shoebox in the city, Marcus?" he'd ask at Thanksgiving, while carving the turkey our mother had spent all day preparing, the kitchen windows fogged with steam and the smell of sage and butter filling the house. "When are you going to get a real place? Maybe settle down?" There was an edge to his voice, a sharpness that hadn't been there before. Christmas was worse. "Must be nice not having any responsibilities," he said, watching his kids tear through wrapping paper while his wife looked on with tired eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her sweatshirt stained with what looked like baby food. "Just living your bachelor life in your little apartment. No one to worry about but yourself." I bit my tongue. I didn't tell him about the 80-hour weeks, the stress that kept me awake at night, the constant pressure to perform, to exceed expectations, to climb the ladder. I didn't tell him about the relationships I'd sacrificed, the social life I'd given up, the weekends I spent in the office while everyone else was enjoying their lives. I didn't tell him that my little apartment was all I could afford while I was aggressively paying down my student loans and saving every penny I could. I just smiled and changed the subject because I didn't want to make him feel worse about his own situation, because I still remembered the big brother who had taught me how to ride a bike, who had defended me from bullies in middle school, who had been my hero once upon a time. But Derek's resentment grew. It became more obvious, more pointed, more cruel. He started making comments about my career, suggesting that I was probably just a paper pusher or a corporate drone, that I'd sold my soul for a paycheck, that I'd forgotten where I came from. He'd make jokes about my apartment in front of the whole family, describing it as a closet or a prison cell, laughing as if it was all in good fun, but I could see the malice behind his eyes. Our parents would laugh uncomfortably, trying to keep the peace, but never quite defending me, never quite telling Derek to stop. I think they didn't know how to navigate the strange reversal of our fortunes. The way the son they'd never quite understood was somehow thriving while their golden boy was struggling. What Derek didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I was doing more than just surviving. I was excelling. My work had caught the attention of senior management, and I'd been promoted twice in 3 years. I'd been headhunted by a larger firm, one of the prestigious names that everyone in finance recognized, and I'd negotiated a salary that would have seemed impossible to the kid working night shifts at that diner. I'd been building a portfolio, making smart investments, living well below my means while my net worth grew steadily. I kept my old apartment intentionally, not because I couldn't afford better, but because I was focused on building wealth, not displaying it. I'd learned from watching too many colleagues who made good money but spent it all on luxury cars and expensive condos, living paycheck to paycheck despite their impressive titles. Then, 2 years ago, everything changed. The CEO of my firm announced his retirement, and the board began searching for a successor. I wasn't even 32 years old, young by executive standards, but I'd built a reputation as someone who could see opportunities others missed, who could navigate complex deals, who could lead teams through challenging situations. I'd brought in major clients, generated significant returns, and earned the respect of people who'd been in the industry for decades. When they offered me the position of CEO, I was stunned. When I accepted, I was terrified. When I succeeded in my first year, exceeding every metric and goal they'd set, I was vindicated. With the new position came new responsibilities, new pressures, and yes, new compensation that was almost obscene compared to where I'd started. I could have moved immediately, could have bought a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the lake, could have announced my success to the world. But I didn't. I stayed in my little studio for another 6 months, partly because I was too busy to apartment hunt, partly because I'd grown oddly attached to the place that had witnessed my struggle, and partly because I wasn't ready to deal with my family's reaction. I knew Derek would have something to say, and I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. But eventually, practicality won out. I needed space for a home office, for the documents and work I brought home, for the video conferences with international clients in different time zones. I needed a place that reflected my position, where I could host small dinners for board members or important clients if necessary. So I started looking, and I found it. A stunning 3-bedroom penthouse in one of the most prestigious buildings in downtown Chicago, on the 42nd floor with panoramic views of the city and the lake. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the space with natural light. The kitchen had marble countertops and professional-grade appliances I barely knew how to use. The master bathroom had a soaking tub and a shower with 6 different jets. And there was a private balcony where I could stand and watch the sun rise over Lake Michigan, painting the water in shades of pink and gold. The building itself was luxury incarnated. A doorman greeted residents 24 hours a day, wearing a crisp uniform and remembering everyone's names. The lobby had fresh flowers delivered daily, arranged in crystal vases on marble tables, and original artwork on the walls that probably cost more than my first car. There was a state-of-the-art fitness center, a rooftop pool and lounge area, a private theater, and a business center with conference rooms. Security was tight, with key card access required for the elevators and cameras monitoring every entrance. It was the kind of building where celebrities and executives lived, where privacy and discretion were paramount, where the monthly HOA fees alone were more than my old rent. I moved in on a Saturday in early October, when the Chicago autumn was in full display, the trees along Michigan Avenue turning brilliant shades of red and gold, the air crisp and clean with that particular quality that makes you want to wear your favorite sweater and drink hot coffee on a park bench. The moving company I'd hired handled everything professionally, and by evening, I was standing in my new living room, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk fell, feeling a strange mixture of pride and disbelief. I'd made it. I'd actually made it. I didn't tell my family right away. I wasn't hiding it exactly, but I wasn't advertising it either. I updated my address for official documents and mail, but I didn't post about it on social media, didn't send out announcements, didn't make a big deal of it. I figured I'd mention it casually next time I saw everyone, maybe at Thanksgiving, which was only a few weeks away. But Derek found out before then. I'm still not entirely sure how. Maybe he saw something online, maybe a mutual acquaintance mentioned it. Maybe he'd been keeping tabs on me more closely than I realized. Whatever the reason, he called me on a Tuesday evening in late October. I was in my home office, reviewing quarterly reports, when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer when I saw his name, because we rarely talked outside of family gatherings, but something made me pick up. "So you moved?" he said without preamble, his voice flat and cold. "Yeah, a few weeks ago," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Needed more space." "More space," he repeated, and I could hear the sneer in his voice. "Right? Must be nice, Marcus. Must be really nice to just upgrade whenever you feel like it, while the rest of us are struggling to make ends meet." "Derek, I worked hard for this," I said, feeling my defenses rising. "I've been working 80-hour weeks for years." "Oh, please," he scoffed. "You sit in an office all day. You have no idea what real work is. I'm on my feet for 10 hours a day in a factory that's either freezing or boiling, breathing in God knows what, breaking my back to provide for my family. And you're complaining about your office job." I wanted to argue, wanted to defend myself, wanted to list all the sacrifices I'd made, all the nights I'd gone without sleep, all the stress and pressure and responsibility I carried. But I knew it wouldn't matter. Derek had decided that my success was somehow unearned, that his struggles were more valid than mine, that the world had been unfair to him and generous to me. Nothing I said would change his mind. "I'm not complaining," I said quietly. "I'm just saying I worked for what I have. Whatever, Marcus. I'm sure your new apartment is very impressive. Probably has a doorman and everything, right? Probably in one of those fancy buildings where they look down on regular people like me." "It's not like that," I started, but he cut me off. "I want to see it," he said suddenly. "This weekend. I want to see this place you're so proud of." My stomach dropped. "Derek, I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not? Ashamed of your family? Don't want your rich neighbors to see where you came from? That's not fair," I said, my jaw clenching. "That's not what this is about." "Then prove it. Saturday afternoon. Give me the address." I should have said no. Every instinct told me this was a bad idea, that Derek was coming with an agenda, that nothing good would come from this visit. But part of me, the part that still remembered being the little brother who wanted his approval, who wanted to show him that I'd made something of myself, who wanted him to be proud of me, that part made me agree. "Fine," I said. "Saturday at 2. I gave him the address and hung up, immediately regretting my decision. I spent the next few days anxious, distracted during meetings, unable to focus on work. I kept imagining how the visit would go, all the cutting comments Derek would make, all the ways he'd find to diminish my accomplishments. I considered canceling a dozen times, but I knew that would only make things worse, would only confirm whatever narrative Derek had built in his head about me being ashamed of my family. Saturday arrived with unseasonably warm weather, one of those perfect autumn days that Chicago occasionally gifts you before winter arrives with its brutal cold. I spent the morning cleaning my already clean apartment, rearranging things, trying to make it look less ostentatious somehow, though I wasn't sure why I was bothering. At 1:30, I changed my shirt 3 times before settling on a simple navy sweater and jeans, wanting to look casual, approachable, not like I was trying too hard. At exactly 2 o'clock, the front desk called up to let me know I had a visitor. My heart was pounding as I told them to send him up. I stood by my door, watching the elevator numbers climb, and when the doors opened and Derek stepped out, I was struck by how out of place he looked. He was wearing his factory jacket, jeans with oil stains, and work boots that had seen better days. His face was already set in a scowl, his eyes scanning the hallway with obvious disdain. "Nice hallway," he said sarcastically as he approached. "Very fancy." "Hey, Derek," I said, trying to sound welcoming. "Come on in." I opened the door and stepped aside, and I watched his face as he entered my apartment. For just a moment, I saw genuine shock in his eyes as he took in the open floor plan, the soaring ceilings, the massive windows with their breathtaking views. The afternoon sun was streaming in, making the hardwood floors glow, highlighting the modern furniture I'd carefully selected, the artwork on the walls, the kitchen that looked like something from a magazine. But the shock quickly morphed into something uglier. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, and when he turned to look at me, his eyes were filled with pure resentment. "So this is it," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "This is your little apartment. It's home, I said simply, refusing to apologize for my success. He walked further in, his boots heavy on the floor, touching things with rough hands, picking up a book from the coffee table and dropping it carelessly, running his finger along the kitchen counter as if checking for dust. Must have cost a fortune, he said. What are you paying, like $3,000 a month? I didn't answer. The truth was my mortgage was significantly more than that, but I wasn't about to get into specifics. You know what's funny? Derek continued, moving to the windows and staring out at the view. You always acted like you were so humble, so down to earth, living in that crappy studio. But this whole time you were just waiting to show off, weren't you? Just waiting to rub it in everyone's faces that you're better than us. That's not true, I said, my voice tight. I lived in that studio because I was saving money, paying off loans, building my career. I moved here because I needed the space and I could finally afford it. This isn't about showing off. Right? He laughed bitterly. It's never about showing off with people like you. It's always about needing space or career advancement, or whatever other excuse you use to justify leaving the rest of us behind. I didn't leave anyone behind, I said, my patience wearing thin. I made different choices. I worked hard. I sacrificed. You have no idea what I went through to get here. Oh, please. Derek spun around to face me, his face flushed with anger. You sacrificed? You? I sacrificed my entire future when I blew out my knee. I sacrificed my dreams to support my family. I work a job I hate, in a place that's slowly killing me, just to keep a roof over my kids' heads. And you're talking to me about sacrifice because you worked some long hours in your comfortable office. My career is just as valid as yours, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Just because I don't work in a factory doesn't mean I don't work hard. Just because I made different choices doesn't mean I don't deserve what I've earned. Earned? Derek scoffed. You didn't earn anything. You got lucky. You happened to be good at playing corporate games, at kissing up to the right people, at pretending to be something you're not. You're not special, Marcus. You're just a sellout who forgot where he came from. Something inside me snapped. Years of biting my tongue, of accepting his criticism, of trying to be understanding about his bitterness. All of it came crashing down. You know what, Derek? You're right. I did forget where I came from. I forgot the place where people tear each other down instead of building each other up. I forgot the place where success is suspicious and ambition is shameful. I forgot the place where people would rather wallow in their own misery than celebrate someone else's achievements. And you know what? I'm glad I forgot. Derek's face went pale, then red. How dare you? He said, his voice shaking. How dare you talk about our family, our neighborhood, like it's something to be ashamed of. I'm not ashamed of where I came from, I said, my voice steady now, cold even. I'm ashamed of what you've become. You used to be my hero, Derek. You used to be the person I looked up to, the person I wanted to be like. But now you're just bitter and angry, and instead of doing something about your own life, you'd rather tear me down for improving mine. Get out, Derek said, pointing at the door. I don't need to listen to this. You're already leaving, I said. But before you go, let me tell you something. I didn't invite you here to show off. I invited you here because, despite everything, you're still my brother, and I wanted to share this with you. I wanted you to be happy for me. I wanted you to see that hard work pays off, that it's possible to change your circumstances, that we don't have to accept the limitations other people put on us. But you can't do that, can you? You can't be happy for me because my success reminds you of your own failures. Derek's hand shot out, and for a moment I thought he might actually hit me. But he stopped himself, his fist trembling in the air between us. You don't know anything about my life, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You don't know what it's like to watch your dreams die, to feel trapped, to wonder if this is all there is. You're right, I said, my anger deflating slightly. I don't know what that's like. But Derek, your dreams dying doesn't mean you have to spend the rest of your life making everyone else miserable. It doesn't mean you have to resent me for finding my own path. He dropped his hand and turned away, his shoulders slumping. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd gotten through to him. Maybe we could actually have a real conversation. Maybe we could start to repair the damage that had been building between us for years. But then he straightened up, and when he looked at me again, his eyes were hard. "Nice place, Marcus," he said, his voice flat. "Really nice. I'm sure you'll be very happy here in your ivory tower, looking down on all the little people." He walked to the door, and I didn't try to stop him. As he reached for the handle, he paused and looked back at me. "You know what the saddest part is? You actually think you're better than me. You think because you have this fancy apartment and your important job that you've won somehow. But you're alone, Marcus. You're completely alone. And all the money and success in the world can't change that." He left, the door closing behind him with a soft click that somehow felt louder than if he'd slammed it. I stood there in my beautiful apartment, surrounded by all the trappings of success, and felt completely hollow. I didn't hear from Derek after that. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't respond to my attempts to reach out. Thanksgiving was awkward, with Derek barely speaking to me and leaving early with his family. Christmas was worse, with him refusing to even be in the same room as me for more than a few minutes. Our parents tried to mediate, but they didn't really understand what had happened, and I couldn't explain it without making Derek look bad, which I didn't want to do despite everything. Months passed. Winter gave way to spring, and I threw myself into my work, trying not to think about the growing chasm between me and my brother. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious, nothing that lasted. Derek's words echoed in my head sometimes. Late at night when I was alone in my apartment. "You're completely alone." Was he right? Had I sacrificed too much for success? Had I traded relationships for achievements, family for career advancement? Then, in early May, my assistant informed me that I had a visitor who didn't have an appointment but insisted it was important. I was about to tell her to send them away when she added, "He says he's your brother." My heart stopped. "Send him in," I said, my mind racing. Why was Derek here? What could he possibly want? Was something wrong with our parents? When Derek walked into my office, I barely recognized him. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, his face gaunt and his eyes red-rimmed. He stood in the doorway, taking in the expansive corner office with its view of the city, the mahogany desk, the leather chairs, the subtle indicators of power and success. "Marcus," he said, his voice hoarse. "Derek," I replied, standing up. "Is everything okay? Our mom and dad, they're fine." He cut me off. "Everyone's fine. I needed to see you." "Okay," I said slowly. "Do you want to sit down?" He nodded and moved to one of the chairs across from my desk, sitting down heavily as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders. I sat back down, waiting, giving him time to gather his thoughts. "I saw it," he finally said, looking at his hands. "The nameplate on your door. CO. I knew you'd done well, but I didn't realize, I didn't understand." "Derek," I started, but he held up his hand. "Let me finish, please." He took a deep breath. "I've been angry at you for so long. Angry that you succeeded when I failed. Angry that you got out when I got stuck. Angry that you seemed to have it all figured out while I was drowning. And I took it out on you. I mocked you, belittled you, tried to make you feel small because it made me feel less small. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I sat there, stunned, not sure what to say. "I lost my job," Derek continued, his voice breaking. "The factory is closing, moving production overseas. I've been looking for work for 2 months. And there's nothing. Nothing that pays enough to cover the mortgage, the bills, the kids' expenses. Brittany's working double shifts at the grocery store, and we're still falling behind. We might lose the house." "Derek, I'm so sorry," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, despite all the hurt and resentment, he was still my brother, and seeing him like this broke my heart. "I didn't come here for money," he said quickly, looking up at me with desperate eyes. "I didn't come here to ask for a handout. I came here to apologize, to tell you that you were right, about everything. I was bitter and jealous, and I let it poison our relationship. I let it poison me. And now, sitting here in your office, seeing what you've built, I'm not angry anymore. I'm proud of you, Marcus. I should have said that years ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of you." Tears were streaming down his face, and I felt my own eyes burning. I came around the desk and pulled him into a hug, feeling him collapse against me, his body shaking with sobs. "We're going to figure this out," I said, holding him tight. "We're brothers. We're family. We're going to figure this out together." And we did. I didn't just give Derek money, though I helped with the immediate crisis, paying off the mortgage arrears and covering expenses while he looked for work. More importantly, I helped him see that his life wasn't over, that he had skills and experience that were valuable, that he could reinvent himself just like I had. I connected him with people in my network, helped him polish his resume, coached him through interviews. It took time, but he eventually found a position as an operations manager at a logistics company, a job that paid better than the factory and had room for advancement. More than that, we rebuilt our relationship. We started having lunch once a week, just the two of us, talking about everything and nothing, slowly healing the wounds we'd inflicted on each other. He brought his kids to visit my apartment, and instead of resentment, I saw wonder in his eyes as his children pressed their faces against the windows and marveled at the view. Brittany thanked me with tears in her eyes, not for the money, but for giving her husband back, for helping him find himself again. Our parents were thrilled to have their sons talking again, to have family dinners that didn't feel like navigating a minefield. Last Thanksgiving, Derek stood up to make a toast, and he looked directly at me as he spoke. "I want to thank my brother Marcus," he said, his voice strong and clear, "for showing me that success isn't something to resent. It's something to aspire to, for teaching me that it's never too late to change your path, and for reminding me that family means supporting each other, not tearing each other down. I'm grateful for you, little brother. More grateful than you'll ever know." I raised my glass, my throat tight with emotion, and across the table, Derek smiled at me. A real smile, genuine and warm, like the ones I remembered from childhood, before life got complicated, before resentment built walls between us. Standing in my apartment later that night, looking out at the city lights reflecting off Lake Michigan, I realized that Derek had been wrong that day he visited. I wasn't alone. I had my family back. I had my brother back. And that was worth more than any corner office or fancy apartment or impressive title. Success isn't just about what you achieve professionally or how much money you make or what kind of apartment you live in. Real success is about becoming the kind of person who can extend grace to those who hurt you, who can help others without holding it over them, who can build bridges instead of walls. Real success is about using your blessings to lift others up, not to elevate yourself above them. I learned that the hard way, through pain and conflict and years of estrangement from someone I loved. But I learned it. And now, when I walk past that CEO nameplate on my office door, I don't think about the title or the prestige or the validation. I think about my brother, about the journey we've both been on, about the fact that we found our way back to each other despite everything. That's the real achievement. That's what I'm truly proud of. Not the apartment, not the job, not the success, but the relationship we rebuilt, the forgiveness we extended to each other, the family we chose to be instead of the strangers we were becoming. Because at the end of the day, when you strip away all the external markers of success, what matters is the people you love and who love you back. What matters is being able to look at yourself in the mirror and know that you used your blessings well, that you helped when you could, that you chose compassion over pride. Derek mocked my cheap apartment, then saw the CEO nameplate on my door. But the real story isn't about him being wrong about my success. The real story is about both of us learning what success actually means and finding our way back to each other in the process. That's the story I'll carry with me, long after the titles and apartments and achievements fade into memory. That's the story that matters.